Welcome back. I'm delighted to be joined by UKIP's leader, Nigel Farage, who many would say is the man whose years of campaigning have brought us this momentous referendum. Nigel, we have to start with that appalling killing of Joe Cox. Now, it has prompted a debate about whether there is too much hatred in political life, and you know that many people say that you are a politician who stokes up hatred.
I think I've been a politician that's been a victim of it, to be honest with you. Look, when you challenge the establishment in this country, they come after you. They call you all sorts of things. And to be honest, we saw the Chancellor a few minutes ago, despite the fact overnight he talked about toning down the rhetoric, doing the same thing again. All we have said in this referendum campaign is we want to take back control of our lives, take back control of our borders and put in place a responsible immigration policy. And quite frankly, when it comes to negativity and rhetoric, we've seen far more of it from the Remain side.
But that poster that you unveiled last week of hundreds of Syrians trying to cross the border into Croatia, you tweeted that it showed that the UK has failed us.
No, the
EU has failed us. The EU has failed us. You're absolutely right, sorry. The EU has failed us. But there is no way, under current EU rules, that any of those migrants will get into Britain. It's simply not true that the EU has failed us in that sense.
It's failed people in Germany, it's failed people in Sweden.
But it hasn't failed the UK, has it? And your campaign is about... Go on.
This referendum is about us leaving a failing European Union. The euro has beggared the South. No, it's very relevant, actually. Why would we wish to stay part of a political union whose currency has plunged millions into poverty and whose open door migration policy last year has led to massive political change across the north of Europe, and not to mention, just the other week, 4 people arrested plotting to blow up Dusseldorf, who came in posing as refugees last year. These are serious issues. I don't want us to be part of a failing union.
Your colleague on the Leave side, Michael Gove, said this morning that when he saw that poster, he shuddered with the words.
Well, have you seen their posters? They've been doing very strong posters, not only about Turkey, but about the number of terrorists and criminals who've come into Britain under free movement rules.
But just getting back to this issue of stoking up emotions that show the worst side of us, well, you did say...
Well, what about the truth? What about the truth? The truth is that what Angela Merkel did last year was a huge policy failure that has left much of Europe less safe than it was before.
So do you stand by your remarks that we could see Cologne-style incident in this country of men abusing women?
I don't want us
on the streets. Because many would say that those are deeply divisive.
Well, what happened in Cologne happened, and things like that have happened since in Germany. The real point I'm making is that as part of a European Union, we've lost control of who can come into our country. We would be safer taking back control.
Let's look at this another way. You have been quoted as saying that if we don't control immigration, there was a serious risk of violence. Is that what we saw last week?
I said there wouldn't be. I said there's a serious risk of violence in the rest of Europe. I didn't think this country would descend into anything like that. I've never said it at any point in this referendum campaign. But what I am saying is this, that if we carry on with current migration levels, that's another 10 million people in the next 20 years. That's more people than live in Greater London. And I think part of the debate that's been lost here, and it's been lost because of the tragedy, and I completely understand that, but part of the debate is, and for George Osborne to say Brexit's for the rich, actually, it's those at the poor end of the scale who struggle to get their kids into local schools, who can't get GP appointments, and whose children and grandchildren cannot get onto the housing ladder.
Your other Leave colleague, Boris Johnson, who you publicly said you admire, said only a couple of days ago that he's passionately pro-immigration and pro-immigrants. Would you share those sentiments?
Yes, managed properly. We've not been managing it properly. And we've had... this Prime Minister, at 2 elections has promised us he would reduce net migration to tens of thousands a year, whilst knowing he was never going to be capable of delivering
So
it.
you
And that is dishonest politics.
So you can be passionately pro-immigration and in favour of reducing the numbers?
I think anybody sensible would be.
What numbers are sustainable for this country, in your view?
And to listen to Jeremy Corbyn this morning on another channel saying he sees no upper limit to net migration coming into Britain,
What is the limit for the UK?
Well, for 60 years after the war, from sort of 1950 right the way through to the turn of the century, we had net migration in Britain running at 30 to 50,000 people a year. At that level, this was a non-issue in British politics.
So that's the right level, is it? 30 to 60,000?
I would like to see it back to a sustainable level, but crucially, I would like to see this debated in Parliament, voted on by our MPs, who could then be held accountable at the next election.
Because you are not in government, and if we vote to leave, well, we don't actually know who will be Prime Minister, but, you know, whether it's the current Prime Minister or perhaps Boris Johnson, there is no suggestion from any of them that they would get migration down to 30 to 50,000.
Well, but here's the point. We are not fighting a general election with one manifesto against another. What we're fighting here is a referendum, and the question is simple. Should we be a self-governing nation that makes its own laws and indeed controls its own borders, or are we happy to stay part of a bigger political union? If we vote to leave, it will be up to the House of Commons to set the number and to do the job.
Now, there's been media suggestions that Boris Johnson would like you in a Boris Johnson government. Would you like to serve in a Boris Johnson government?
Firstly, this purely comes from media speculation. And secondly...
So you haven't been approached?
And secondly...
You haven't been approached?
We are 4 days away...
Come on, answer the question. You're supposed to be straight-talking, Nigel.
No, I haven't. But we're 4 days away from the most important constitutional referendum in our lives. Let's worry about what comes afterwards on Friday.
And are you going to win?
I think we have momentum. We did have momentum until this terrible tragedy. Clearly...
So the tragedy will have an impact on the outcome, in your view?
It's had an impact on the whole campaign for everybody. Now,
what impact is that?
Well, when you're taking on the establishment, you need to have momentum. I don't know what's going to happen in the course of the next 3 or 4 days, but I would say this. You know, the action of one person, you know, with serious mental issues. I mean, frankly, what we saw was an act of terrorism. It's been a dreadful week. Orlando, killings in Paris, and now one of our own MPs. It's difficult to tell, but I just think this. Those that have made their mind up to leave because they want to get control of their country back, they will go out and vote on Thursday.
Can I just ask you one quick question? The chairman of your Rochdale and Hayward and Middleton branch tweeted that in some senses he saw this killing as part of some conspiracy, and he said it was similar to the killing of Anna Lind in 2003. Presumably you wouldn't want your colleagues to be in some sense...
I don't know what you're talking about, but if you want to drag it up, well, fine. Let's look at what some members of the Labour Party have said about Israel. You know, if you want to drag it down to that level, we can. We are fighting a referendum in 4 days' time on whether we're going to be a self-governing, normal, independent country, and that is what we should be talking about.
Nigel Farage, many thanks.